it's going to be a shared presentation where you interact with me, and I'm going to show you how we're going to work together through those 45 minutes. All right?
Super, thank you very much. Off you go.
So let's start now. Can you hear me all right and see me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So to all my lovely participants that I cannot see, can you just make sure that you are like available, in flesh in front of the screen, and can you quickly open the chat box? We'll be using the chat box to communicate a couple of times. Can you please type in the name of the town where you come from, so that I can look at the map later and see where you all are from? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And thank you very much for being so interactive. So, this session is on reading and teenagers. And just one more thing before we start. Webinars are not as interactive as live meetings, like, face-to-face meetings. And sometimes when the presenter, is trying very hard to tell a joke, well, he or she just won't know whether the joke was received or was not. So I have a way to communicate with you. Whenever I try to say something funny and you think it's funny, you could react by typing a smiley emoticon into the chat box. Can you try that now? Type in a smiley, yeah? Yeah, like this. And as I said, sometimes, as teachers, when we tell jokes, our students don't understand them as jokes. That's why I'm going to show you this sign. I hope you can see it. It's a smiley. Whenever you see this sign, you should type in a smiley in the chat box, okay? So the first time, I'm going to do this, at random. You can also laugh at my jokes without seeing this sign. All right? And if you could mute your microphone, because I think we can hear some people in the background as well. I have muted my children, aged 18 and 20, so they won't be. Yeah, humor is peculiar, and that's why, because I cannot see you, I'm going to show you like this sign every time. I would like you to at least smile. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is I'm going to ask you to vote a couple of times in the chat box and write your response, usually T for true, F for false, Y for yes, and for no, etc. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to show you two pictures. This isn't the FCE exam. I'm going to show you two pictures of two teenagers, and I would like you to tell me which one is more typical, more representative of a typical teenager in your country, the one on the left or the one on the right. Can you please type in L or R for your response, okay? Yeah, I think I agree that it depends on the school, and it is possible to see teenagers who read, but I think as a rule, we see the teenagers on the left who are not very bookish, they're not very studious, etc. Okay, so I hope we agree that the situation in Poland is just the same as the one in Latvia. Now, would you agree with this statement? A typical teenager in my country reads a lot, and I don't mean reading for English classes. I mean reading set books in general. Can you please type in T or F, true or false? A typical teenager, okay? False, 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 yeah, okay. I wrote a typical teenager, not a teacher's child, because, teacher's children, by the way, a joke, okay? Teacher's children are different, as you know. We buy them educational toys, we get them books, etc. So I think most people believe that typical teenagers don't read a lot. But I think I will disagree with this statement, okay? Because I think they just read different kinds of things, and I think you have experience of that as well. So when I was, I guess, your age, about a quarter of a century ago, that could be a joke, but it's not. We all read books, and books were made, from paper, and they followed a logical sequence. So before you got to page 10, you had to read pages 1 to 9. And if you wanted to read chapter 23, you had to get there by reading the first 22 chapters, etc., etc. Now, what we read today and what most teenagers read is, yeah, as you're pointing out, they're just reading differently. So they don't read typical text, but hypertext. And I think you will agree with me that we all have this experience of reading, for example, a text on Wikipedia. So you read something and then you click on a link to something else. The link redirects you to a different page. And then you press, the little video icon because, you see a video, you start watching the video, then you move on somewhere else after the video. And after 20 minutes, you don't have any idea of what you were reading originally. Would you agree? Yeah? Yes, no? Well, you're going to this experience. Now, imagine that you grow up in a world like this, where all you read, or most of what you read, is hypertext. Imagine a world like the world in 2020, and living in a world like this, for 20 years, and then from this world, you're taken to this world. And that's the old-fashioned world where I was a teenager, right? So teenagers who read hypertext a lot, they read, a bit of a picture, a bit of a video, some text, etc. And then they go to the examination room and then, they get something like this. And now the question is, how can we make them go from one world, to that world and somehow help them focus? But first of all, there is some good news. Studies have shown that teenagers who read hypertext and play video games and read books at the same time, can read faster and achieve a higher degree of comprehension. But the condition is they have to play video games, read hypertext, and read traditional books. So one of them just won't do, okay? I hope you realize where this bit comes from. Do you? By the way, can you type in your response? Yeah. So it comes from the state exam, the national exam, and as I said, the problem is now to move our teenagers, from this new world to the old-fashioned world of text and helping them get there. And I have a suggestion. Instead of giving our students more texts to read, we should give them perhaps the same number of texts to read, but dig deeper. That's why you've got this picture of the iceberg. Most of the iceberg is underwater. And what do you think the connection is between the iceberg and the cow? Can you please type in your creative response before we get into the more practical part? I'm just going to, search your brains. Can you find a connection between the iceberg and the cow? And type in your answer. Like you have like 20, 30 seconds for that. Most of it cannot be seen. A cow isn't a farm animal. I'm loving those responses here. The unseen part. The cow is more than a mammal. Okay, the bulb is not visible. Both have something in white, Natalia. Thank you very much. They both consist of water. Yeah, like humans. You don't know what is on her mind. Blue background. There's more than you can see, etc. Exactly. That's the idea. There's more than you can see, and once you get deeper into those texts, you should try and milk them. The way you milk a cow, you should try and milk a text. So my idea is that we should not search for more texts, but we should work with the existing texts that we've got in course books, that we've got in exam preparation materials, and milk those texts to the full. Okay, so let's get started and let's see how it's done. Okay, so you can think about working in a text in two different, in many different ways. Okay, so I'll just get to, okay, so I think you're all familiar with the kind of exercise where you've got headings that you have to adjust or match, with the paragraphs. Okay, and I think sometimes we just go through this exercise without milking this properly. So what I do with my students is, of course, once they read the text first, I never show them the missing headings. I ask them to read the text first. And this is something you can try with your students. Ask them to read the text and make their own headings for each paragraph. Okay, so this way, they have to really show you that they understood the paragraph or understood the text. So that's step one. Read the text, create your own headings, then compare them with the headings that you've got. Perhaps some of them will be quite similar. Perhaps some of them will be quite different, but that's the beautiful space for learning something about how a text is structured, okay? So that's the first thing. Second, I think there's something we should do with this extra heading or extra sentence. And I think as an extension, perhaps, it might be a good idea, and I sometimes do it with my students, it's moving from reading to writing. The idea is that I ask them to write their own paragraph for that heading that could also appear in the same text. Is it time consuming? Yes. Is it much better than doing 100, past papers? Yes, of course. Okay, because it really shows you that you have to understand the text before you, can deal with it. Of course, if it's true false, if it's something easier, like 50-50 chance of getting something right, most of your students can get 40% without in the exam without actually reading the text. But this isn't my point. Okay, so as I said, milk the text. Don't show them the headings first. Show them the text. Ask them to write their own headings. Then create something for the missing heading. Okay. Now, do you sometimes deal with students who tell you that they have read a text, like after 3 minutes, they say, "Teacher, I'm done, it's over"? Yes? Is this your experience? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think this is a good idea for those super fast students. And for this one, you will need to use an interactive board and 2 laser pointers. The idea for this exercise was taken from one of my favorite films of all times. I hope you can recognize the characters. Star Wars, of course. And what I do with my students is I display the text on the interactive board, and I take 2 students and give them laser pointers and ask them to look at the text. It has to be quite, a lengthy piece. And I tell them, now, in this text, can you find something about how many calories butter contains? And I have to scan the text very, very fast. And they have to point with the laser where that piece of information is located, okay? And I give them the next question is like a small competition. Of course, some people might be thinking that it's only engaging 2 students, but as you know, when you've got 2 students standing in front of the classroom, the others will be watching with them and, telling them look, it's like, the line on the left or the line on the right, first column, second column, etc. Okay, so of course, this one is not for reading at a very deep level of understanding, but this one is what we call scanning, right? So you sometimes have to find a specific piece of information that refers to a specific question, because the questions in exams, national or international, some of them test the gist and some of them test the detail. So this one I think is great for understanding detail, okay? Now, I hope when I read through your exam materials, I think there was something with missing sentences, right? There are some texts with missing sentences. And once again, before I show my students the missing sentences, I ask them to read the text itself and write down their own missing sentences, okay? Once again, this takes way, way, way more time than the task itself. But as I said before, and I will repeat this like 1,000 times today, the idea is not to give our students more papers, more text. The idea is to work with what we've got. And the idea is to try and make the best and the most out of it, okay? So with the missing sentences, they have to write the missing sentence. Of course, if it's too difficult and you don't have enough time, in every text, there will be 5 or 6 sentences, 5 or 6 gaps. So you can tell your students to work in groups of 3, and each group has to write, for example, only 2 sentences. Of course, what you do next is you uncover the original missing sentences, and then you compare the sentences with what they wrote. So that's one idea. Second, and I think you have to make this a system. Like whenever I work with this kind of exercise with my students, I always tell them that apart from telling me the answer, they have to justify their answers, okay? And so they have to show me a link with what's before the gap, what's after the gap, what's in that sentence. And now I have a question for you. When you ask your students to do something more difficult or more challenging, like write the answer and justify, they will, of course, write the answer. But when you ask them to justify and you tell them, you know, I told you last week that you had to justify those answers as homework, they sometimes make this kind of face, like, do they? So, you know, whenever something is more challenging, you know, it's always like, I didn't know that. Teacher will use like, you know, you forgot to tell us. And, you know, you didn't really forget to tell them because you tell them every week. So now I have a question for you. I usually start working with a new group around October, and I teach this system. When do you think most of my students do their homework with all those extensions and the way I ask them? How much time do you think it takes a typical teenager to understand that when I say answer and justify, that's what I mean? So we start in October. When do you think they're ready? Which month? Can you please type in your answer? Typical teenagers, December. So this would be, I like the May idea. Yeah, March, January, after 3 months. Yes, I think it's about 3 months with the brighter ones. Okay, but still, you know, if we teach a group, you know, for some time, if you teach a group for, let's say 2 or 3 years, you know, if you teach them the system in the first year, it's going to last. And it's really beautiful to see, like after half a year, for example, when they open their books and the workbooks, for example, and they've got the answers and all the text references are highlighted in pencil. This is really what makes your heart, like, you know, grow fonder. Okay, so once again, any type of text with close type of answers, like multiple matching or true false or multiple choice, everything has to be justified. Okay, make this a system. They may call you crazy, but as a character in Hamlet said, there's method in the madness. Okay, once again, don't do more text, but try and do what you've got and try and milk the idea and always, you know, dig deeper. Yes, we may be crazy, but there's method in the madness. Okay. Now, which of the skills, speaking, listening, reading, or writing, which of these skills do you think your students are most happy to work with in the classroom? Can you please type your answer? So like the 4 skills, okay? Listening, reading, writing, speaking. Okay, thank you very much. It looks like, you know, we have arranged those answers, you know, for the flow of my ideas. Of course, it's speaking. And I think that when you work with a text, when you work with reading, what you have to do to help your teenagers is create some kind of expectations and all kinds of reading. If you want to get deeper into this, it should start with speaking and end with speaking, because otherwise, you know, the students don't see a reference. Like, you know, they're reading something, but they don't really understand why they should be, you know, bothered with that. So if you have a text like this, for example, you know, food miles is basically, you know, the idea of how long food has to travel before it gets into like your table. So, you know, if it's, for example, locally grown vegetables, the number of food miles is lower than, for example, in case of bananas from Ecuador or Colombia, okay? And of course, the idea is to limit food miles because it's air pollution and all that. But, you know, sometimes you can ask your students to think about a different perspective, okay? And that's something that I like to do with my students is I give them roles. And I don't even ask them for their opinions about, like, you know, Natalia, for example, are you in favor of like reducing food miles or not? I just tell them that in this exercise, you have to be for the argument and you have to be against the argument, okay? So they read the text and they're already reading the text with some kind of expectation. Like, I have to read this to find arguments for or against the idea of reducing food miles, okay? It's very basic, but it gives you a reason to read. And I think when I observe young teachers, they sometimes get into the reading like straight away without showing any connection. And I think when you tell a teenager, now read this text because it's got some interesting examination questions, I don't think it's going to be very relatable, by the way, joke intended, because they don't see the connection between now and the exam, okay? So the idea is whenever they read a text with different kinds of arguments, you tell them the roles and they have to either, defend or promote an idea, or perhaps criticize the idea. Okay, so once again, they read with a sense of expectation. When you have to read a text with expectations, with creating your own arguments, you have to get deeper as a reader. You have to get deeper into this text than answering just like 5 or 6 multiple choice questions. Okay, so start with speaking and end with speaking. Okay, now for those students who like running, now if only your classes, I mean the rooms, if only your classrooms allow you to do this kind of exercise, I sometimes make a copy of the text, like 2 copies of the text, and I put those copies into different corners of the room, and I divide my group into 2 smaller groups that don't see the text. Each time, a person can go, like run to the text, read as much as they can, remember as much as they can, get back. Another person goes there, reads as much as they can, get back as they can, so on, and have like a time limit of 5 minutes. And mind you, I don't ask them to recreate this text. Okay, I just ask them to remember collectively as much as possible. When they get back to the front of the classroom and the texts are at the back, I ask them comprehension questions about that. Okay, so they have to rely, like, wholly on their memory. Okay, they have like a time limit for the team. All right, 5 minutes, and it's their choice if they all spend like 1.5 minutes reading the text, or if one person stays there for 3 minutes and the next person stays for 2 minutes. Collective memory is always stronger than in individual memory. Okay, so it's always going to work better if your students learn to cooperate somehow. Okay, so do you think that your classroom would allow you to do this kind of activity, like with some kind of rearrangement of the furniture, etc.? Yeah. Yeah, and I think after half a year of online education, they would be more than happy to do that. Okay, I did this with my university students, second year of English studies. We had groups of about 16, 18 students, but our hall at the university is about 15 meters long. So we go out into the hall. It is loud, yes. We've had complaints, yes. Will we do those activities again when we get back to university? Of course. Okay. All right, now, can you recognize the people in the pictures? Can you type in the names of anyone that you recognize? Yes, Bill Gates, yes, Mozart, Gates, yes. Yeah, so of course, 2 of them were easy, Gates and Mozart. Does anybody recognize the man at the bottom of the page? No idea. Exactly, because how could you have an idea of a guy who's a scientist? Anyway, that's a very important person, I would say. Have you ever heard the idea of the 10,000 hours rule? Yes or no? Can you please type in your answer? Yes, no, yes, 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 no, no, no. Okay, so I'm going to explain this quickly. Okay, so the idea of 10,000 hours is that some people believe that in order to achieve like world-class expert level at something, playing the guitar, speaking a language, cooking, playing the piano, any other skill, driving, etc., you need to spend 10,000 hours on it. It seems, to be making sense. Because you need to practice. They say practice makes perfect. But as the man in the picture, his name is Anders Ericsson. As he says, the rule is false, and the rule is false for a very simple reason. Imagine that you are learning to drive. Yes, like a post-traumatic experience, but still you're learning to drive again, and you have no instructor, so you do everything intuitively. And you try to like teach yourself. So obviously you make mistakes, and you make mistakes, and then you keep practicing for 10,000 hours. What will you learn after 10,000 hours? You will make more mistakes. Okay. Okay. Have you ever been to the gym? Okay, are there any fitness freaks in the room? Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I go to the gym like a couple of times a week. And whenever I tell people that I go to the gym a couple of times a week and I go running, I get this reaction. I don't know why. Okay, I don't know what's wrong with the world. And I think the gym is a very good example because, you know, if you go to the gym and you learn an exercise and you learn it the wrong way, some people say that you have to unlearn the exercise, and that always takes more time than learning it. Okay, so the 10,000 hour rule, you know, beautiful as it sounds, is simply not true, because you can do something without, you know, without putting your mind to it, without getting feedback, and simply repeat the mistakes. And I think many people, many students will believe that it's true. Okay, now the question is that reading something in English lessons, in English classes, can actually help you become a smarter person. Of course, this refers to our students, that, you know, there are many things that they read in our lessons, and later on they go out to the world, and this is something, you know, they have learned in our classes, not in biology, not in physics, not in chemistry, etc. To be honest, I think we as teachers have learned a lot from English course books and materials. Would you say that's true? Do you know things, you know, from, you know, the materials you worked with? Okay, okay. And this is another thing that I think we should stress when we work with reading and text and our students. Okay, show them that, you know, reading in English and reading a foreign language is a beautiful tool to find out more about the world. So what I did with this text with my students, I asked them to write their thoughts at the beginning of the lesson and the end of the lesson. Okay, so at the beginning they had to write ideas like why I think the 10,000 hour rule is true or false. Of course, most of them thought it was true. So they wrote, yes, I believe in practice, you know, the more you practice, the better you become, etc. Then they read the text and they wrote their ideas after that. And what you can see here is, once again, getting deeper, digging deeper into the text and milking the text as much as possible. So you have to really compare what you read to your own ideas before and after. And for that, you need to understand the text, which is the whole point of this, okay? And you leave the classroom without repeating, like, you know, yet another myth, okay? What I do as an extension of this, once we've got those arguments, like, you know, we've got, like, you know, a class debate, for example, or a class discussion, because it's not always like, you know, for or against. Sometimes we have like a discussion about what you can do to learn more meaningfully, not spend more time, not say like, you know, I read like, you know, this material for 10 or 20 hours, but maybe spend 40 minutes, but think of better ways to work with that, okay? So once again, the point is to show our students that through a foreign language, you can learn something about the world. Because, you know, much as we love the present perfect, or the second conditional, or any other grammatical structure, you know, you don't really meet a lot of people who read the text because they're crazy about the third conditional or crazy about the present continuous. Most people read books because they want to find out information, okay? And there is a beautiful quote from Jean Piaget, quoted in Gleitzman book called Basic Psychology. And it's about accommodation and assimilation of new knowledge, okay? And the idea is that when you receive new information about, for example, the solar system, you have to accommodate your mind. So sometimes when you read something that's bigger than your mind, you have to like open up your mind, like stretch your mind, like accommodate that knowledge inside your mind. But you also have to assimilate the knowledge, because, you know, sometimes you're not ready for that. Now, a personal question, but I cannot see your faces. Have you got children? Yes, 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 with an exclamation mark. Is it like, you know, yes or yes? Okay, so most of you have children, and when your children ask you questions, like, you know, how far is it from this place to the moon? You know, you can't tell them it's like a number of thousands of kilometers, because they don't understand the idea. So you assimilate this knowledge and you tell them it's like walking for 2 weeks, for example, okay? And walking for 2 weeks or walking for 7 days is always an easier way to understand this, okay? So that's the idea. So you accommodate your mind for knowledge but you also assimilate the knowledge, to help your students understand something, okay? It's like, to make this more accessible. And I think this interplay is never completed. And I think as teachers, we have to bear in mind that the foreign language that we teach through texts and other skills is just a means to communicate. Once again, our students are not very fascinated by the idea of present perfect, but they want to find out more. And I think after some time, they realize there are so many things they have learned because of us, okay? When does your school year begin, please? Can you tell me? September, yeah, just like ours, yeah. So that's the idea. When you start, this school year, maybe this is something we have all forgotten on the way, but we are something more than any other teachers. I hope there are no chemistry teachers here, but I think that when you have this feeling that English teachers are somehow better than other teachers, do you have this feeling that somehow better than other teachers? No, no, sure, yes, no. Okay, well, in fact, I think in a way, language teachers are superior because we teach so many things. Like through reading and speaking, we teach about the environment, we teach about relationships, we teach about family, about healthy lifestyles and all that. There is no other subject where you learn all that. So if you sometimes feel proud of yourself, you have every right to feel that way, okay? Now, something about the exam, true-false statements. If you never read the text and you only answer the questions, true or false, what are the chances that you get the right answer? Can you please tell me? 50-50, yes. So I'm going to show you a way later how you can always get 100% in true-false. But now, when we have got something as basic as true-false, once again, I think most teachers just stop at this moment where the students get the answers, and I think they don't really milk the idea. So what I do with my students is with true-false texts, first, of course, they have to justify why it's true, why it's false. But then I tell them that they have to make the true sentences false and the false sentences true. Once again, this will take some time. This will require, a change of structure, maybe a change of a little detail here or there. But once again, they have to work with this idea, read the text, read the statements, and once again, dig deeper. Thank you for the thumbs up, Daria. Okay. That's the whole point, okay? Once again, we don't want to bring more text, photocopy more things, waste more paper. It doesn't make sense, okay? So comprehension, happens when you dig deeper, okay? And when you can analyze a text really, really deep, then I think you will be able to deal with, well, the more, let's say, superficial things in the exam. Okay, so that's another simple idea, but once again, this will make your students work harder while you can take a walk around the classroom, see how they're doing, and give them some feedback. Okay. Now, as we go on, in the last couple of minutes, I'm going to show you a few things that will help your students deal with reading, which are not always connected with reading itself, and sometimes it's connected with expressing yourself. So reading is passive, but sometimes, you have to tell your students that, sometimes we use different words to express ideas, and these are not dictionary definitions. So what I do with my students to help them understand the implicit information in the text is I ask them to come up with different definitions of different things, but not standard dictionary definitions, okay? So can you please take a look at those three things? And now this time I would like you to use a number, like number 1. What do you think number 1 describes? She makes bits of heaven every Saturday because she loves me. Can you please type in your answer into the chat box? Food, love. It's a person, right? She makes bits of heaven. So who is she? Mom. Mom. Yes, you're getting this right. This was my son's definition of my wife. And of course, bits of heaven was pizza. Okay. Second one, it makes every man 20% more attractive. Can you please type in the answer? Shower, nice. Cologne, Smile, a tie. I'll put on one next time, perhaps. Wife, suit, hat, axe, nice. Brains, a white shirt. Irina, is that personal? Okay. All right, scars. Yeah, thank you for not mentioning hair. Okay, that's very kind of you. Okay, and the last one. Teenagers stop functioning if you take it away from them. Question 3 was that. Mobile, yes, mobile, iPhone, phone, yes. Okay, so these are the answers. Okay, so it was mother, suit, and Wi-Fi. And now when you can express your own ideas about very simple things, you also become a better reader of the implicit information, right? Because, you know, you can sometimes describe a thing, or you can describe a person without stating the obvious, but yet state something that's obvious enough for everyone to understand something, okay? And I think people who can express themselves in very creative ways can understand texts which are implicit, okay? So now I have a task for you. We've got 3 things. We've got coffee, we've got talking on the phone, and we've got shoe shopping. I would like you to take like 30 seconds and write down your own definition of coffee, okay? Non-standard definition of coffee, okay? You have 30 seconds to a minute. Can you please type in your definition of coffee into the chat box? Okay, makes you alive, wake up call. Morning friend, nice. Means of waking up. Makes you want to do things. Okay, so as you can see, you know, we've got like 100 participants, and we've got like, you know, many possible definitions, all of which are true. And this is beautiful that, you know, you can find so many things of talking about one item that are kind of drink of God. Valentina, I love that one. Drink of pleasure. Yeah, Natalia, thank you very much. Okay, so that's the idea, you see. Okay, so now let's carry on in the time remaining. Now, somebody wrote, I think a moment ago, that not every student is able to analyze and think like, you know, really, really deeply about something. I totally agree with that, right? But I also believe that education is like taking a student from a place where they are to a place where they should be. So I'm not saying that, you know, when you try those activities once, everything will work like, you know, beautifully the first time. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's a process, you know. I told you about that my students can understand the system of me wanting to do their homework in a certain way, like for 3 months. But education is a process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. Some students can make a little more progress, a little less progress, but they will make progress if we prompt them. Okay, if we don't prompt them because we give up, because we decide, I mean, like Kacper, like one of my weakest students, you know, he will never make progress. Leaving him in that place will actually make him stay in that place, because without you, they won't make any progress. Okay, so we have to try and take them to a place where we think they should be, okay? Now, I think many of your students live with the idea of, I saw this on the internet, so it must be true. And that's why we've got something like, you know, fake news, right? People read something and they just repeat the information without really analyzing the source. And once again, your English class, your English course book can become a place, a source, where they will find out that not everything they see on the internet is true. And they will learn to differentiate between facts and opinions, which is a very useful skill in any language, okay? This is something that I see with my students, that distinguishing between fact and opinion isn't really a matter of the English language. Some of them still have the same problem in Polish, okay? So when you think about your students, you can, for example, use Latvian in that case, okay? And you can help them, like, you know, use English and their L1 to show that we express facts and opinions in different ways. And they have to be very, very careful when they read something on the internet, something about you know, health, something about dieting, something about relationships and so on. Once again, your classroom becomes the place where they read something for life. So major as it sounds, like big as it sounds, you know, this is a place where they will learn something for life, okay? And I think it's much bigger than, you know, any kind of exam and getting the best score and so on, okay? Now the next thing that I do with my students is, well, this one is in fact a warm-up, and it's called self-reflection. And this is something that I do with my students when we have reading somewhere in the main part of the lesson, or we have a text connected with a subject that may be quite difficult. And sometimes when you ask your students a question, you get this response like, I don't know, like, how should I know? I've never seen this question before, etc. So what I do is I use the reading follow-up questions, you know, the ones that you have like as the last exercise or something. I use them at the beginning of the class. I ask my students to relax. They may close their eyes if they want to, and I read those questions and give them like 10, 15 seconds to think about the answer. Very important, don't ask them to tell you the answers at this moment. Just read the question like, you know, what was the disadvantage of silver over gold? 10 seconds, think about it. What was the first paper money like? Give them like 10 seconds to imagine that, etc. And then you move on to all the usual stages of the lesson. Then like in minute 20, 30, or 25, you know, they read the text and they find the answers to the self-reflection from the beginning of the lesson. When you ask them the follow-up questions, they cannot really tell you, this is the first time I've seen the question, because they've heard the questions before, okay? So this is the idea of, once again, creating the expectation for the text. So it's not like really the first time when you read that, you don't read with like a blank mind, open mind, but you read with some kind of expectations, which may be right or wrong, but at least you have something to compare the text to. Do you get the idea? Is it making sense to you? Are you still there, by the way? Yes, no? Okay, there was a question whether it's whether these are the comprehension questions. Yes and no, because you know they are not really the main examination task, right? Like multiple headings or multiple choice. They test comprehension in a way, but they also give you like they should also provide you with a chance to have your own opinion. For example, you don't really need to know the fact, like what was the first paper money like, to have some kind of imagination, right? To imagine that. In the same way, you don't really have to know everything about silver and gold, but you can imagine, for example, why gold should be more expensive than silver, etc., etc. Okay, perhaps because there's more of it, you know, because it's a different color, because yellow is more attractive than silver, whatever. You decide at the beginning. You do read the text later with some kind of expectation. Okay. Now, do you sometimes have students who speak Latvian, even though you tell them to speak English all the time? Does it happen in your classrooms? Of course. Thank you very much for being so realistic. I love realistic teachers. Okay, so what I do with and these are the comprehension questions. Okay, what I do with my students is I divide them into two groups: the Polish group and the English group. Of course, next time we switch roles. And I tell them, now look at those, you know, 8 or 10 questions that you've got under the text. And what I would like you to do is group A, answer the questions in English, group B, answer the questions in Polish. Then I put a student from group A with a student from group B. They work together. They compare their answers in Polish and in English. So in your case, it's like Latvian and English, okay? And they have to compare whether they wrote the same ideas. Of course, at the same time, you know, they compare the translations, but it's mostly about comparing the ideas, okay? And it's also giving your students like a legal chance to speak mother tongue in the classroom. And I think when we create those little moments, which I sometimes do, when we create little moments for speaking L1, your students, in a way, may become like a bit keener to speak language too. When you create like little places where you show them that the knowledge of your own language may be very helpful in learning a foreign language, that's where you show them that, you know, you are not as crazy as they thought. Or maybe you are crazy, but in a different way. Okay, so that's more or less the idea. Thank you for the smiley without the sign. I think, you know, you're catching on my sense of humor, which I think is just, you know, fantastic. Okay, so I guess we'll be coming to a close. One more thing I would like to show you is, do you know where this comes from? Do you know where this extract comes from? This is the first work of literature that we read in English studies. And this will be the last thing I will show you today. Okay. Yeah, it's Beowulf. And this, I came across this idea for reading as a group activity when I was at college, and we had to read Beowulf. I think, you know, the story could be summarized in like 5 sentences, but, you know, the poem is so long. What we did as English students at college, everyone read just one verse, right? Like a couple of lines, one verse of Beowulf, and summarized this to the whole group. Okay, because it was so long, it was so boring and so difficult, and I don't know why people have to read this in the first year when the language level is lower. Anyway, it's Old English, but we read the translation. Still difficult. So what I do with my students when we do reading text is that I try to make it group work if it's only possible. So when we've got, for example, this text with, let's say, you know, 5 different people, 5 different jobs, and people have to do like, you know, matching headings. I tell 5 students to read a paragraph each, and they get together and then, you know, summarize this to the whole group. Okay, before everyone reads the whole text. Okay, when it's a narrative, like, you know, a story, I tell them to read like lines from 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, etc. only. Then, you know, they close their books, they get together, and they have to arrange themselves in the order in which the story went. This is something that I think we all do with children and story cards, right? You play them a story, they have story cards, and arrange, you know, themselves in the same order. So with teenagers, of course, it's not story cards anymore, but it's like, you know, their own part of a story, and they have to put themselves, you know, somewhere. So basically try and use reading as a group activity as often as possible, because it's a great idea. And I think it's such a big difference between reading as it's taught in other, let's say, classrooms, not yours, of course, because yours is creative and the best. But, you know, some teachers are like, you know, come to class and say that today everyone is going to read, and the understanding is, okay, everyone is taking their own text, there isn't any interaction, so it's boring. I think you all agreed that skill number 1 to our teenagers is speaking, right? So when they have a chance to combine reading and speaking, it's a bit of jigsaw reading, okay? But everyone has to read a part and contribute to something bigger, okay? So I hope that it's making sense for you. And once again, you know, the idea was to show that the text that our students read can be milked much more. Okay. And by the way, this is my idea of how you can help your students get 100% in true/false questions. That's a way to always get 100%, you know, not 50%. So you can take, you know, a screenshot of this one, a print screen, and you know, if this is the only way you remember from this session, well, please don't tell my mother, okay? Because she'll be, you know, disappointed, and well, she thinks that, you know, I'm a great teacher trainer, so well, I'll stay that way, okay? So before we say bye-bye, once again, let me stress this like crazy. Okay, work with the text that you've got. Don't think about more text. Don't listen to your students' parents who tell you, you should give us more past papers, you know, in preparation for the exam. The text, well, the idea is not more. The idea is deeper, okay? Dig deeper. And if you would like to leave me some feedback, I'm going to take a photograph in a moment of the screen and everything. That's a Facebook page where you could leave some feedback for me. And now I'm going to ask my fantastic organizers is it possible for everyone to turn the cameras on like for